Pirate kings, pirate queens, non-binary monarchs of the sea, hello, hello. We are at the halfway point of the countdown to OP06. If you're just joining, we are going through the top decks of the Asian format as determined by the data. So far I've gone over Reiju at number 7, Perona at number 6, and Enel at number 5. If you're enjoying the content, feel free to leave a like, and if you would be so kind as to subscribe, I would be very grateful. It means a lot as I'm making these videos. In case you're a new viewer, here is a quick rundown of my process for these videos. I put every single deck list from One Piece top decks and second storage into a spreadsheet, weighted each entry according to the tournament's level of competition, the list's placement in that tournament, and how far into the format that tournament took place to come up with a point system that let me arrange the decks into tiers, as well as an algorithm to put together a typical winning deck list weighted to the conditions that I just mentioned. You'll also see helpful stats about a deck's cost curve, the amount of 2K counters, non-counters, blockers, events, and other relevant figures, so take a look and enjoy as we get into the next deck in our countdown to OP06. At number 4, we have the most anticipated new leader of Set 6, Yamato. So throughout the format, Yamato did well, but he wasn't the top deck that would break the meta like a fair amount of people expected. Native double attack is extremely powerful. It's very common to see him just swing 8k turn 2 and demand 2ks from the opponent immediately. At the same time, double attack also means that your opponent is going to get 2 extra cards, so they may be down to let it through, especially if they're a 5-life leader. But at that point, they need to be very careful not to let the second one in. And furthermore, just one double attack is going to turn on Yamato's second ability to reattach 2 Rested Dawn to a character and put even more pressure on the opponent. Even if the double attack doesn't hit, this is going to do a very good job of thinning your opponent's resources as you build your own board and keep hitting them for more and more and more. Yamato has tons of deck building diversity. We've got the Wano build, very aggressive, not the easiest time against control. Sky Island, just play bodies on bodies on bodies. The Fishman build to search out Hody Jones and do some other resting shenanigans. Some good stuff hybrids, and Fortress Yamato. Those first 4 types are all spiritually in tune with each other. Fortress is very much its own beast, so I've separated Fortress from the rest of the data as we look through this. And even though the Wano build was the most commonly reported winning build, taking achievement into account with the algorithm leads us to a Wano Sky Island hybrid version. This data list is a little teched out, coupled to of some places where you can easily adjust ratios. I feel like those are pretty evident here. Onami is going to shine in this deck more than any other. Her trigger to KO a 5 cost is still plenty useful, but this is where the banish really comes into play. When you swing with a banish Yamato for 8k, your opponent has to make the decision to either lose 2 cards in their hand or 2 cards in their life. They might have a blocker, but we also have ways to invalidate those. And if you're swinging double attack banish 9k, they have to give up 3 cards to not lose 2. So either way, you are draining their resources. She's going to be especially useful versus stall matchups like Enel, and she can clinch certain games if this banish double attack goes through. As the Yamato player, you are able to tailor the timing of this Onami, as well as the power with which you swing, to the exact point where you want your opponent to give up the most resources. And the leader isn't the only good target for this effect either. Cracker, Hody Jones, Zoro, those are all huge threats with banish. Sky Island was the most successful variant of Yamato, and Shura is going to get us to a lot of our curve and utility. We're not running the full Sky Island package. Gedatsu is pretty rare since, on the surface, he is counterintuitive to our leader's goal. But the cards that let us develop our board, get around blockers, and survive to the next turn are all here. Yamato usually wants to go first in order to be the aggressor, but with Shura we still have a great play going second. Hiyori has the same usefulness as she does in Enel, with a few more targets here. Some to get attackers out, some to heal, less emphasis on card advantage or shutting down our opponent's attacks. Beige, for instance, was played pretty rarely in Yamato lists. Less than half of the ones I was able to find, and most of them were pretty early on in the format when people were still figuring the leader out. Izo's going to be right at home here since he lets you rest a 4-cost character. You're shutting down so many blockers. You rest Rebecca, 4-cost Borsellino, Yonji, Sanji, Marco if you're playing against a Newgate. You just mow them down. He's not going to hit Sabo, Queen, or Momonosuke, but those won't be the only blockers in most decks, and at that point, you just attack into them. Up until now, Izo has had the drawback of no real long-term use in a game if you can't pick him back up, unless he's just that one last attack you need to go wide at the very end of the game. The great thing about Yamato, though, is that the secondary ability lets you turn Izo into a 5k attacker, so he can swing at life for basically free. The Ohm Holy combo is going to be one of your go-to 4 or 5 Dome plays, alongside swinging for 7 or 8 and using Onami. If you just keep attaching Dome to your leader every turn, swing only with him, don't develop a board, you're very often going to run into a point where your opponent just manages to hold out at the very end and then revenge kill you. So a 2-for-1 character combo gives you more pressure and makes control decks use more pieces to out them. The best thing you can do while playing Yamato is weave in multiple, well-powered hits to maintain pressure and keep your opponent on their toes. However, we are running even more 4-Dome characters at the max number of copies, like Kikunojo. I've gone into how good a card she is in the Enel video, but she's especially good here because you only need to hit your opponent's life once to get her effect live. So that situational caveat we see in other yellow decks is less of an issue in Yamato. On top of that, she's hitting for 8k with those rested Dome. You are getting the 2k counters out of your opponent's hand. If your opponent guards that first double attack, Ohm and Holy give you more bodies, and if they don't, Kikunojo gives you longevity. Charlotte Cracker is one of our best trigger attackers. If your opponent's at 3 life and you're lower than them, he is an 8k double attacker. That sounds pretty situational, but I feel like a lot of leaders need to really race Yamato to not lose, and the amount of life you have is not solely up to your opponent in this deck. And because of those reasons, he is an equally valid target for your Onami effect. Kozuki Momonosuke is the other big Wano card from set 6. 5 cost 6k is the exact stat line you want to have on a blocker. Even if Reject and Black Shenanigans can out him, Amaru, Izo, they aren't going to touch him. And on play, he lets you place one of your other Wano characters on the field into your life. This play isn't as common in Enel because your only targets will be Hiyori and Kiku, but with green, we can put Izo in there as well. All those cards are great to get back in your hand or trigger off life. The earlier builds also ran Neko Mamushi from set 6 to potentially come out of trigger and swing into your opponent's active blockers, so if you really like this direction, there are more ways you can tinker toward it. Nothing new to say about Satori, he's just generically good and searchable off of Shura, but Hody. Hody may not have been the most compelling antagonist, he may not be the one that we remember, but you're not going to forget about this card when you're playing against Yamato. Rush for green is a big development, and the ability to rest any 2 characters and or Don means your opponent always has to play around him. You give up 1 life to activate this effect, and that sounds like a drawback, but it can set your Amaru up, and to a lesser extent, Cracker. So it's really a perk. If you're putting everything into Hody, he can swing for 13k max, 14k if you use Amaru with him as well. So if you have full combo, if you're able to rest 3 of your opponent's characters, they're going to need 4 blockers for that lethal blow, and if they have those 4 blockers or 10k counter in their hand after all the hits we are giving them throughout this whole game, good for them. Good for them. They deserve the dub, if they have it. But real talk, playing him is a decision that you've got to weigh carefully. If he doesn't end the game, but you can survive through your opponent's turn, chances are he's going to close it on the crackback. But if you think your opponent might have that much defense, there are some other options you might want to consider. Our other finisher is the 9-cost Secret Rare Zoro from set 6. He might be a little controversial here. He was in just over half of the lists analyzed for this. His inclusion in the CS winning list from December is going to be carrying a lot of that weight for him, but he's at least worth talking about. 9 cost, 9k. When he attacks, you can rest 1 and restand him. Then when you attack again, you can rest 2 more and then restand him again. So full power, he is swinging for 16k 3 times in a turn. Basically a power crept kid leader. If he swings after all the pressure your opponents put out, come on, they're not getting through that. He just has to get the chance to make those attacks. He doesn't have rush. I mean, thank God he doesn't have rush. That would be insane. But if you're up against a control deck and they haven't had to spend all their resources on your earlier bodies, they'll just get him off the board, and then you have wasted a really pivotal turn. So this is going to serve you best against matchups like Enel or Reiju, where you know he's going to stick on the board and likely be a checkmate. There's a chance he'll get to swing in those other matchups, but it's not quite as reliable, and there may be other cards you'd want to play instead. Your mileage may vary on him. I personally might wait a second to drop money on the copies. I've got other cards that are a bigger priority, but I've really enjoyed him in the testing before this video. You're the One Who Should Disappear. Why is it always the 0-cost events that have the longest names? This card rounds out the deck's defensive capabilities. If you're in a matchup where Kikunojo or Zoro aren't going to be as useful, They're easy discards, but the main benefit this has is that it lets you keep swinging and deploying at max efficiency, rather than because of a distinct lack of no-counter cards. As you'll see here, we're running an average of 17 to 19 no-counters. Definitely not a low number, but definitely not as many as Enel or Sakazuki or even Katakuri. The trigger to heal a life without any cost is also great, but it's situational, and stacking that with Hiyori is going to be a little easier said than done. And Amaru is just such a wonderful card for all the reasons we mentioned in the Enel video, and it combos beautifully with Hody for a finish. And if you really want a turn 2 going first double attack to hit, you can play it on 3 Dome, swing 9k, and force them to either take it or discard 3. This is the one yellow deck that's not going to be playing Reject very often. We've already got so much aggression, we're gonna get through our opponent's life, and since we're the aggressor, control really isn't as in theme for us, so at this point, it's probably just a win more card. Here we have those beautiful frequency stats. You'll see that unlike the other decks we've covered so far, the cards in the deck list aren't necessarily the ones that were played the most often. If I were constructing these lists like I did all the way back in set 1, and just going with the most often played cards at their most played number of copies, we'd be seeing everything up through Mihawk and either Cracker, Satori, or Inuarashi. But since we're differentiating these decks based on the level of their achievement and their recency, the list the algorithm gives us is going to look a little bit different, especially in a deck as varied as Yamato. We've got some more Wano cards, Nekomamushi, Momonosuke to search, Inuarashi, Beige is a yellow staple. Mihawk actually works really well with the Holy Ohm combo, really with any of these Slash characters. He's great for generating bodies. He would be the 51st through 54th cards in the deck if we had space. And here's that next tier of popularity and the potential tech cards that we have for this deck. Speaking once again to the way this algorithm works, you'll see that Holy and Ohm are in the final deck list, even though they were played less often across the board than Reject, Gedatsu, or Yamato. Normally, I'd be saying a couple words about each of them, giving my own thoughts on them, but this video's getting kind of long, and we've got another Yamato deck to go over. Most of these Yamato variants are going to lean very heavily on the yellow side of things, but Fortress Yamato is almost entirely green except for, his bestie Onami, with a very heavy Supernova and Don Quixote package. This deck still puts out pressure. You are getting your opponent down to 3 life as fast as you can. But it's also, of course, about defense. Bonnie and Baby 5 both search the pieces you need and draw your opponent's attacks away from your life. You're always going to want Kid and Rosinante as a combo, so tailor your opening hand and those searches to what's going to get you the cards you need. The set 4 Baby 5, as well as Scratch Manapoo, are searchable 2k counters. Baby 5 could set you up for a free Punk Gibson play, but that's pretty occasional at best. Rosinante is perfect for Kid. Even if Black does some shenanigans to KO him, Rosinante can save him, and you get to keep that wall up. Killer is a cheap blocker you can play out the gate, and he is a welcome return from back in the OP01 days. Plus, you might be able to attach Stone to him with the leader ability and get that extra advantage for free. Izo is still our perfect androgynous boy, we love him, and Monet can stop your opponent from getting more swings in, or give you a better shot of pushing for lethal by resting a blocker. Sometimes she might even just dissuade your opponent from attacking on certain turns. We're still running 4 Hody. This deck is much more defensive, but he's just too good a finisher not to include. And the 8-cost Kid from way back in set 1 is, of course, the centerpiece of the deck. And the great thing is that you can get him going turn 4 going second, the minute you hit 8 Don by attaching to him with the leader ability, and that is an annoying wall to deal with 1 turn early. And after you set that magnetic wall up, maybe even 2 of them, your opponent's going to have to try and get through it if they want to get to your life. And if they try and get through your Kid, you just start freezing their attackers with that 10-cost Doflamingo. Very clear-cut strategy here. I haven't played many games with the Fortress build of Yamato. I wasn't even sure I was going to cover it until I started scripting everything and decided to separate them out. But the couple I've played were super fun. Definitely give it a try. I'm a big fan of this deck. The one thing I will say, though, is that Fortress Yamato did not see nearly the same amount of success as the other variants did. At least from what I was able to find on One Piece top decks and second storage. Again, they can't functionally get every single list in the meta, but if I'm only finding 4 lists, that does tell me it didn't make the biggest dent in the metagame. Another couple pages of stats for you. Bonnie, Rosinante, Izo, Kid, Apu, and Punk Gibson were played in all of these lists. Baby 5, Onami, Killer, Hody, Doflamingo, Baby 5, they were played in 3 of the 4. Whoever wins this war becomes Justice, and Monet got played half the time. But with this few lists to go off of, those are still enough to get them into the 50 for the video. Then finally we got some spicy techs here. Each of these were played in only 1 of the 4 lists. Again, not much I'm gonna say because this video is getting long. I've got 3 more to do. I've got a lot of editing to do if I want to get these all out by Friday. But if you have had a chance to try Fortress Yamato and you've used any of these cards, let me know what you think of them. If you have your own favorite variant of Yamato, if you've got a crazy 50 that you want to share, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I love being able to do videos like these where I get to go into multiple builds of a leader. If I had the time to make content that I really wish I did, then exploring alternative builds would be one of my favorite things to do. But stay tuned for the top 3 decks and that big video with my thoughts on the format as a whole. Subscribe if you'd like to support the channel and know about the new videos straight away. And keep it unga bunga double attack till the next time. See ya.